Hello, I'm David Williams, the bakery lecturer at Truro and Penwith College, and today we're going to talk about different types of flour, the amount of gluten in them and the effect that gluten has on flour, making pastry and bread. What is gluten? Gluten is made up of insoluble proteins that come from the endosperm of the wheat berry. The two main ones being glutenin and gliadin, but we're not going to baffle everyone with science today. The main different types of flour that we tend to use is the plain flour, which we tend to use for cakes and biscuits. This is got the least amount of protein in it, round about 6 to 8%. Bread flour, on the other hand, will hold about 12 to 14% of protein. Hence, it'll give it more elasticity, which forms the skeleton of what we're making. We're going to start off today by actually showing you some dried gluten and the effect it has when it's mixed with water and it's agitated. So we've taken the gluten out of the flour and we're just stirring in some water. It's very hygroscopic, which means it absorbs a lot of water. And you can see already that it's come to a paste. And now I'm just going to work it together. You can see it's already becoming elastic. We'll work it on the table a little bit with a tiny bit of flour just to stop it sticking. Now, bread obviously needs a lot of elasticity to catch the air that's given off by the yeast and stop the bread collapsing, whereas pastry doesn't need quite so much because we need it to break smoothly in the mouth. Now you can see our gluten's getting quite elastic. See there, now this gluten has become very elastic, almost as you can spread it to see through it, and you'll see when we make our dough in a moment, we know when a dough is developed because we do this, it's called the window pane test, that you can actually see through it without it breaking. Okay. Now, just out of interest, we're going to pop this in the oven just to see what happens to it, and we'll show you later on what happens. We're now going to make up the simple bread dough to show the effect of the gluten in the flour, the strong flour. A very simple bread dough. You only really need 4 things to make bread: flour, salt, yeast and water. I've put a little bit of fat in with it today just to stop the staining, make it taste a little bit better. So I've weighed my flour and my salt is in there as well. And I'm going to mix this on the table so you get a good view of what I'm doing. Okay, so the flour and the salt on the table, we're just going to make it into a bay. Yeast will go into the centre. And the water is now going in. This is where I make a fool of myself and tip it all over the floor. The water has been tempered to around about 27 degrees, and we're just going to dissolve the yeast into the water. If you were mixing on a machine, the machine would probably do it for us. But our yeast is now dissolved. Now we're going to start to bring the flour into the centre. Starting to mix it in, I'm bringing the walls up a tiny bit with my scraper. A lot of people ask how long you should do this for, and if we were doing it on a machine, you'd mix it for about 2 minutes on first speed. That's basically just to stir all the ingredients together, stop them being thrown all over the room. And then to develop the dough, to develop the gluten, which will form the structure, we'd mix it on speed 2 for around 5 minutes. I've now got my flour and water into a state where it's not going to run off the table, hopefully. And I can now use both hands to start mixing it in. This has all been pre-weighed, so we know how much dough we're going to get out of this. Very important in all forms of baking to weigh and measure, to get the same product every time and get the chemistry right from what's going in on the table. We've now got the dough to what we like to call the flock stage. We just want to incorporate all the ribbony stuff into it now. We don't want any cores in the bread when we start to cut it. Challenge today will be to make sure all the ingredients are used and nothing's left on the table. Okay, we're at a stage now where we've had about 2 minutes. Everything has come together, but as you can see, the dough is still coming apart very easily, so we need to develop the gluten. So about 5 minutes hard work now to knead the dough up into a smooth ball. Okay, so I've now been mixing the dough for around 5 minutes. Had quite a good workout. The energy you put in will be the energy that comes out of it. So we've got a nice smooth dough. The important thing is now is not to let it skin over. So we're just going to cover it in plastic and let it recover. This dough will rest for about 30 minutes. Then it'll have a knockback and then we can work it off. I have got a dough that I made earlier, which I'll go and get now to save us a little bit of time. Okay, so there we are. Dough we made earlier, which is developed and it's nice and elastic. We'll just see if we can get that window pane test. We just continue to stretch the dough out, hold it up and see the light through it. And we know that we've developed the bread enough that the gluten will do its job and hold the structure. I thought it would be interesting to do some plaited bread today. How many strands should we do?
5.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. Yeah, we're going to do a 5-strand plait. So the trick with this is to make sure that every strand is weighed the same. Right, so we've weighed off 5 pieces at the same weight. We'll do something with this in a moment. First thing we need to do is shape the dough. We'll start off by rounding it up and just pushing it out into little barrels. 5 rolled out. All the little rest it needs, come back to the first one. We're rolling them out so they're fat in the middle and thin at the ends. Okay, so you can now see we've got 5 pieces, all the same size and shape. We're just going to set them up now to do a little bit of plaiting. Experience shows me that we're just laying number 4 slightly over the top. So there's always a sequence to plaiting, and this one goes 2 over 3, 5 over 2, and 1 over 3. And then we can speed it up a little because it's the same sequence repeated. 2 over 3, 5 over 2, 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 5 over 2, 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 5 over 2, 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 5 over 2, 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 5 over 2, 1 over 3, 5 over 2, 1 over 3, 3. Pinch the ends together when you've got there. Never really looks right until you give it a little roll and bunch it up in the middle. And that's our 5-strand plait. There are 5-strand plait. Hopefully that will double in size. For the time being, again, I'm going to cover it over so it doesn't skin. We're going to have a go at doing an 8-strand plait now. It's something I haven't done for years and it could well go sadly wrong. So here we go. 8 goes under 7 and over 1, and we do that only once. They take up their new positions now. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This number 8 now goes over number 5. Number 2 goes under 3 and over 8. We're basically tying the ends in. And then number 1 over number 4, 7, under 6 and over 1. That's the process. All we have to do now is repeat it. So 8 over 5, 2 under 3 and over 8, 1 over 4, 7 goes under 6 and over number 1, and then we go back and have another go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 over 5, 2 under 3 and over 8, 1 over 4. Don't be afraid to move these around to give yourself a bit of space. 7 goes under 6 and over 1, 8 over 5, 2 over 3 and under 8, tucking round over there, and then 1 over 4, 7 under 6 and over 1, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 over 5, okay. 2 under 3 and over 8. You'd think I'd be learning the sequence by now, but I'm not. And that one goes over 8, 1 over 4, 7 under 6 and over 1, 8 over 5, 3, 4, 5, so that's there, 2 under 3 and over 8, 1 over 4. And then we'll put number 7 under 6 and over 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 over 5, 2 over 3, sorry, 2 under 3 and over 8. Starting to get our shape. 1 over 4, 7 under 6 and over 1, 8, 1, 2 is over 5, 2 under 3 and over 8, 1 over 4, 7 under 6 and over 1, and we're getting to the end now, so we're just going to pinch them all together, and like all plaits they never look right until you give them a little roll and a bunch up, and somehow successfully we've done an 8-strand plait. Okay, so we'll put him on the tray next to the other one, and he's now off to the prover to rise for about half an hour. Okay, so we've taken this little ball of gluten that I put in the oven a while back, which is just baked off. Everyone thinks it looks like a baked potato, and I'm just going to cut it in half so you can see what happens to gluten. And you can see now that it's turned into a rubbery structure. This is only dry gluten and water, and the water's turned to steam and it's got caught by the gluten strands which have formed a skeleton in there. So it's just like a sponge. Okay, now that relates to our bread dough, which we worked and developed, which is now nice and stretchy. And we talked about the window pane test, and we can probably see it a little bit easier now that this dough is developed, and we can stretch it out. And they call it the window pane test because if you can pretty much stretch it out thin enough that you can see things behind it, then we know that that gluten and the dough is developed enough to make our bread. We're going to move on now to plain flour, which has got a protein content of about 6 to 8%, so a lot less protein that's in the bread flour, which is again around 12 to 14%. And we're just going to make up a little bit of simple sweet pastry to show you the effect of something that hasn't got much gluten in it. So, simple recipe, half fat to flour, and we're just going to rub that in to make a crumble. There always seems to be a lot of fat in short pastry, and the theory behind it is that the fat coats all the small particles of flour, which stops them binding together, stops the gluten developing, hence our pastry, our short pastry, will break with a clean fracture, hence the name short. It's like a biscuit snapping open, not stretchy at all like a bread dough. Now we want to crumble this fat and flour together until the flour is coated in fat, which in this case we're using margarine. Now to stick that all together, we need some water or some sort of liquid. Some people will put egg in it if they want a little bit of lift. I've got half sugar to fat, half water to sugar. So we're going to dissolve the sugar in the water. This will save us getting any sugar spots in the pastry when it bakes off, so it's always best to use caster sugar, but you can use granulated if you want to dissolve it in the water. Okay, so he's there, and again, everything is weighed and measured. Now the trick when making short or sweet pastry, the only real difference in short pastry and sweet pastry is the amount of sugar in it. So the trick to making it is don't work it too much, just gently stir it together, because we don't want to develop the gluten, which will make our pastry tough, and also when we're lining cases with it, it'll shrink. A lot of people think that their pastry is shrinking when they've baked an empty flan case or blind baked it. It's really because they've overworked it. I'm going to tip this out on the table so the camera can see it a little bit better. You can see that I'm not really mixing this together and just pushing and squeezing. If you're doing this on a machine, a mistake quite a few people make is use the dough hook Don't use the dough hook, use the paddle or the beater as we call it. You can see there's virtually no effort going into this at all. I'm just squeezing and moving, as opposed to when we were making the bread. You had quite a workout mixing it. Okay, so now we've got our short sweet paste made, very quickly mixed, and you'll see the difference in the bread dough, which was elastic. This is just breaking apart with a clean fracture, and that's what we mean when we say something is short. It breaks very easily. Because it does make it a little bit difficult to work with. Just to show that it's not too bad, I'm just going to line a little foil case for you, show you the best way of doing it. When we're rolling out pastry, as little flour as we can get away with. Any flour that goes on the table or on the pastry is going to end up in it, and again it will toughen it. So just enough to stop it sticking. If you keep it moving, it won't stick to the table. Nothing sticks when it's moving. You'll notice I haven't put any flour on the rolling pin. Shouldn't really need it. Just a little bit on the table. Stop it sticking there. The difficult thing now is to get it actually into the foil, so I like to roll it over the rolling pin. Put the foil there and then unroll it. Now some people will bake the pastry off like this and then trim it afterwards. If you've made your pastry correctly, you shouldn't need to do that, it shouldn't shrink. We're just going to trim around the edge with a knife, but use the back of the knife when you're trimming, because if you use the front of the knife, it's quite easy to take a little bit of the aluminium foil off, and that will go in the pastry, which obviously we don't want. That pastry can be used again. Again, we don't work it down like a bread dough. So there it is, our simply lined foil dish. Now we can blind bake that, but I still would recommend that it has a good rest for at least 20 minutes before it goes in the oven, that any gluten development will just relax and it shouldn't shrink while it's in the oven. Okay, so out of the oven now, we've got our 5-strand plait, which has come together quite nicely. We've also got the monster 8-strand plait, which my colleague made me do. I'm holding it a little bit carefully because we cut it in half, just so you can see the structure inside. The holes aren't too big. The gluten has made the skeleton, which has caught the gas that the yeast has given off while it's fed on the natural sugars. And now we've got a nice light spongy loaf. If we'd made this with plain flour, we wouldn't have got the volume in the bread, because the gluten wouldn't have been strong enough to catch the gas. One other flour we didn't talk about was self-raising. Self-raising was invented by a Bristol baker in about 1840 for cooking sponges and cakes, and it's basically plain flour with baking powder in it already. If you wanted to make your own from plain flour, you need to add about 40 to 50 grams per kilo and sieve it through well, and then you'll have your own self-raising flour. Okay, I hope you've understood a little bit about the strength of flours and the gluten content, and I'll see you next time.